Hello, and welcome to Season 12 of the Meet the Mancunian podcast, Social Impact Stories from Manchester. I'm your host, Deepa Thomas-Sutcliffe, and I'm so glad you're here today. This season, I'll be speaking with people who are driven by passion and guided by purpose. Individuals working in different ways to shape Manchester and strengthen our communities. In each conversation, we'll explore what motivates them, what keeps them going, and what impact their work is having across our city. These are honest human stories about why people care deeply about what they do. New episodes drop every Tuesday. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or at meetthemancunian.co.uk. Thank you for joining me. Let's meet this week's Mancunian guest talking about social change. Passionate about supporting people and organizations with change, we hear from Kerry Tottingham, co-director of Brilliant Thing. In Kerry's own words,
I think success is about change. It's both about mindset change and systems change. If we can inspire leaders, inspire people with power and responsibility to use in ways that support sustainability and healthy work cultures, then that's a win.
Thank you so much, Kerry, for joining me today.
Thanks, Deepa. Hello, everybody.
Great to be talking to you today and to be hearing your inspiring story. What first sparked your passion for supporting the Manchester community? Is there a moment or a story that started you on this journey?
You might be able to hear from my accent that I'm originally from the south. So I'm not a born and bred Mancunian, but I have lived up here since my early adulthood. And I guess I arrived here fresh from university and with quite a lot of expectation about what my life was going to be. And I didn't really know where to start. So I started with volunteering, and I did lots of volunteering in lots of different charities and community groups and Manchester Museum and Manchester Art Gallery, and eventually started being a sort of jobbing artist. So I did lots of art workshops for kids and families and in community centres. And it was just a really great education in the diversity of the voluntary sector and social enterprises and arts organisations and community rooted stuff that I could have hoped for, really. I felt really privileged to know and be part of and contribute to all of these different organisations.
Really interesting to volunteering to different places or being associated as an artist with different places. You just get a very different perspective of so many different organizations, and that probably gives you a very deep appreciation for Manchester's social impact space, which is always evolving and always interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us about how your journey with A Brilliant Thing began.
I guess I started off as that jobbing artist, and along the way somewhere found out that I was quite good at writing funding applications. So that led me into working with charities and then charity management. And then as I went up the scale, the time that I spent being creative got a little bit squashed. I worked in the NHS and in local authorities, and that kind of work was all about collaboration. So I was using my creativity and participatory art making background, but in a new way. So I was using creative thinking rather than creative doing. And then it got to a point where the creativity was really low. So it was around the kind of pandemic time. I was working in a charity and we did lots of the crisis response work, and it was very tough going. And around that time, I had some health challenges myself as well. So I have endometriosis and a chronic bladder condition. And so I was finding that working in that very pressured environment and with a huge amount of responsibility and not a huge amount of support was detrimental to my health, as well as just needing to be a bit more creative. So I went back to my roots and did a year's worth of freelancing. I basically said yes to anything where people would pay me some money. And it was a bold move because I just got married, we just moved house, and then I left my job, which felt, even though it was tough, it felt secure. and stepped into this kind of unknown again. But actually, it was amazing. And I did lots of things that I wouldn't have done otherwise, working with great charities and great social enterprises and purpose-led businesses. And I refound the love of collaboration. After saying yes for a year, I then worked out what I wanted to say no to and what things I wanted to bring more of in. And that's when we incorporated as a social enterprise. And then the plan was always for me and my two sisters to work together. And so over the last 3 or 4 years, we've spent our time honing what we do. And then one by one, they've joined a brilliant thing. So there's now the three of us working in the organisation. We work in Greater Manchester and beyond. So both my sisters still live down south. So we're starting to work a bit more nationally, which is exciting. And really, it's that bringing together of creative thinking, creative doing, collaboration, and something called healing-centered design, which is what we're really passionate about.
Thank you so much for both sharing your journey, but also the fact that you having a health challenge encouraged you to take a new path and rejuvenate yourself and just think about your options. And then that brings you to a brilliant thing. And I love that you do it with your sisters. I remember meeting them at that lovely Men Tend and Change the Future event last year. Tell us a bit more about what a brilliant thing offers to charities in both Greater Manchester and now beyond.
We want to change how people work. So, like I mentioned, that personal experience of working in a high pressure environment with not enough support, we see that over and over again in the charities that we work with. So, originally we offered coaching and organisational development support. But the thing that kept coming out over and over again were leaders of those organisations or people working in teams who felt like they had to absorb that pressure from the increasing need for their services or from the external environment. So lots of people absorbing that pressure themselves and then becoming ill or leaving the sector. I think that's really damaging when good, talented, creative people leave or become depleted themselves, because that takes away some of the strength of the sector. And if we really believe passionately about all of the kind of social good and purpose-led organisations that are doing brilliant things in Greater Manchester, then we have to really look after their health and well-being. And so part of that is maybe self-care, but the bit that we're really interested in is designing in health, designing in well-being. How can we look at organisations' policies and practices, strategy, operations, team dynamics, all of those things that make up a kind of culture and the operations of what we do? And how can we design all of those things in healthier ways so that people are supported, people feel secure and inspired? And really that's the kind of campaign that we're on. So the way that we deliver that work is we have something called healing-centered placemaking. So I can talk a little bit about our methodology, if you like, which is called healing-centered design. But we use that methodology to do placemaking work. So that's co-production projects with councils and communities and purpose-led organisations. And that's generally around designing some kind of social change or some kind of support for communities, so well-being in communities, for example. So we have some big co-production projects and we do trauma-informed work as well. Healing-centered design brings together trauma-informed practice with systems thinking and creative coaching. So that's the placemaking work. And then we do work with individual organisations. We have something called the Brilliant Club, which is about the well-being of delivery staff and supporting delivery staff to feel valued and to develop their own wellbeing strategies. And then we have the Brilliant Workplace, which is organisational development and leadership development, again, using healing-centred design to design the culture, design projects, design strategies that are really about sustainability. So we want to move people from that kind of high pressure urgency culture over to high impact, sustainable culture. Those are the things that we do. We have facilitation school, we have some products as well.
Thank you so much, Kerry. And you're right, there is a lot of people who we hear all the time leaving the sector because of burnout. The passion's there, but the will is not there anymore because of they've gone
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of high pressured environment and or limited resources. So it's really
Yeah.
powerful what you're trying to do, and that creative placemaking definitely sounds very interesting. When you think about the change you're trying to make, what does
Mm.
that success look like for both your organization, but also for the people that you're serving?
I think success is about change. So I think it's both about mindset change and systems change. So if we can inspire leaders, inspire people with power and responsibility to use that power and responsibility in ways that support sustainability and healthy work cultures, then that's a win. Our work exists through collaboration and exists through partnerships. And if we can start some ripple effects, then we've got really brilliant networks and collections of people that can spread that message. So I guess we want to be the ripple starters and we think it's needed. One of the things that's really valuable to us is creating that community. People often say, I didn't think I could, and then I worked out that I can. And that's kind of success for us, people thinking they can, and then they can support other people to do the same. I had a lovely message on Instagram today from somebody who I worked with 10 years ago about how she loved working in the team that I ran and how it was the first time at work that she'd felt valued and she'd felt like her ideas matter. And then she's gone on to do brilliant things with brilliant teams. So that's really validating and lovely. If we can plant those seeds and then help other people to get them to flourish, that feels important.
I like that about the ripple starter so that
Mm,
those ripple effects can help many more people.
yeah,
Like the lady in your team 10 years ago is now
yeah.
probably helping many more
Uh-huh.
people and teams herself. Share a bit about the impact of what you do.
I'll talk about our work in Bolton. We've been working in Bolton for the last couple of years. The first part of that programme looked like a co-production project to co-produce a toolkit. And that toolkit was about trauma-informed practice, specifically for the voluntary sector. And it covered things like partnership working and development, team dynamics, and the cultural considerations, working with different age groups, all sorts of things. And I think the impact of creating a thing, we're called a brilliant thing because a lot of the work that we do is quite intangible. So when you're talking about systems change or you're talking about co-production, it's quite hard to see it. And so we often, the impact that we create, we want to create a thing out of that impact or using that impact so that it's tangible so people can see that's what it created or that's what it led to. So we created the toolkit in Bolton, which has helped lots of organisations. I think we've worked with over 200 organisations in Bolton now. But it didn't stop there. So we created the thing, but then we created a community of practice around it. And so for the last year, we've been developing a healing centred approach in Bolton to move the sector on from trauma informed to healing centred, which is where we practice rather than responding to need. I had a lovely experience the other evening where I was facilitating a workshop for Bolton CVS, which is the infrastructure organisation. And the workshop was called Light in the Darkness. And it was about kind of stories of hope. It was about the story of us in the room, who's in the room, and how we're going to keep being inspired and keeping our motivation high, and where's the hope. And it was a beautiful evening. The team had put candles and fairy lights out and showed this gorgeous film. But what was really lovely for me was that lots of the people who came had in some way been part of the work that we'd done in Bolton around the trauma informed practice and even some of the language that we were using. So We use certain terms, like we use mend and tend when we're thinking about problem solving. So what do we need to fix and repair or mend? And what do we need to tend to or strengthen, nurture and support? And people were using that language back at me, which I think if you could get some language into practice and then people start thinking through that language, I think that's a real sign that an idea has taken hold. We do want to create brilliant things, but we don't want to leave it there. We then want to create the conditions around that thing so that it keeps evolving and developing and growing. I think that's real impact.
That's very powerful. And thank you for sharing the Bolton example. And I love that it's moved from that trauma informed to the more healing centered approach, which somehow feels more hopeful and looking forward. Can you share a moment that made you think, yes, this is why we do what we do?
I mentioned facilitation school that we run. So we run facilitation school every season. And we started running facilitation school because we were growing and we wanted more facilitators with different skills to us on our team. And we wanted them to know our approach and our framework and the way that we work. But also just because I really love facilitation. And I think the way that we facilitate is quite different. So we use that artist skill set. So we use lots of objects and images and creative activities to teach and to share and to facilitate some quite kind of chunky, sometimes quite difficult subjects. We wanted to share this approach and we had this need to develop some more people to work alongside us. And at the end of every project, we'd always have people wanting to learn more or people wanting to carry on doing this kind of work. And we needed a way for them to do that. So we started doing facilitation school. We've run 4 facilitation schools now. And every time there's been an extra element that we haven't expected. So this time there was a real personal development theme that ran within the group. So whilst the course is about learning some skills and putting them into action and putting them into practice, because we learn by doing, a lot of the healing centered kind of process stuff is actually quite deep reflection. I think there's definitely the seeds of things being born. So one person, for example, had been working for quite a long time to develop this brilliant work that they were involved in and is now feeling like maybe it's time for the next horizon, which I'm a sucker for potential. So I love the idea of creating something new. And so we run facilitation school over 3 days. There's a week in between, and everybody puts their kind of learning into action and then comes back and shares. So there's a real sort of bond that forms within the group and a real connection. We keep the groups quite small so that people can build those relationships. And then we have a WhatsApp group where people stay in touch in between times. So there's a real community element to that course. And I think we could almost sell it as a personal development course as much as we could a facilitation course, because that's what happens. But I guess that's the unexpected, or maybe we should expect magic that comes from doing that deep work together.
Thank you for sharing about facilitation school and people going on their own journey and then being able to put that learning into practice. Does sound pretty powerful. What has been the toughest part of your journey so far, and what's helped you navigate that?
Sometimes, quite often, people come to us or we start working with people and they're quite disillusioned. So oftentimes, either we're brought into an organisation because there's a particular challenge, or an organisation comes to us and asks us to work with them because they know that they're navigating change or they've got a change on the horizon. That means that people have often tried to do some development work on their own, usually alongside a very busy, high pressure, stressful working environment. Within the voluntary sector, the funding landscape has changed a lot. So there's far less funding available than during COVID times, but also lower than it was pre-COVID. So the security and the financial sustainability is wobbly. There's also increasing demands, increasing pressure in communities and in services because needs are increasing and the social and economic landscape of the country is tough. And I think that hope is low. People are often feeling quite powerless. I really believe that people are powerful, all people are powerful, and that everybody has power within them. But that can sound quite fluffy if you're about to make someone redundant. And so navigating that kind of moving people from the feeling or experience of pain towards that feeling of collective power. And when I say pain, personal, social, societal, injustice, all of this pain, and then moving towards collective power and hope and feeling empowered, that's a tough journey. And people need to build evidence along the way. And sometimes challenges are followed by challenges are followed by challenges. And then the only thing to strengthen and look after is yourself going through those challenges. I guess the toughest part is the length and the difficulty of the journey, but it's also the most rewarding because actually when that little spark of inspiration, that little bit of hope comes, it's something to build on. It's like tending to a fire. And then all of a sudden, you've got somebody who's refusing to work in ways that are damaging them and refusing to give up. And that's a powerful thing. It's a challenge and a big reward.
I hear you. I guess supporting people through that journey to the other side can be very rewarding and also very challenging as people navigate the many dimensions that you referenced. When the work becomes heavy or the progress is slow, what helps you stay motivated and hopeful?
The first thing that sprang to mind was my sisters. So our relationship is really important to me and to all of us. And we are so lucky to have each other. We cared for our mum together before she died. We have raised our children together, even though we live in different places. We have supported each other through all of the life challenges that you inevitably go through. And actually having that close couple of people who you know you can really rely on and trust and know you completely is such a gift. And I'm not somebody with a huge group of friends. I know a lot of people and I am connected to and feel connected to a lot of people, but it's that close-knit sisterhood, which I think I find so valuable. So the people around us, my sisters and then our families, are really, we need them. In terms of a mantra, I think our organizational mantra is design it in. So if you need something, you can have it. You just have to design it in. If well-being feels far away, then what are you doing every day? How are you designing your life to bring in more well-being, to bring in more joy or peace or ease or success or change or whatever it is that you want? I think the difficult part is sometimes working out what it is that you want. And then I think with enough reflection time, with a bit of support, with the right skills and space and tools, once you know what the problem is, then you can find the solution. You probably already got it in you. It's just a bit of reorganization. So whenever there's something that feels insurmountable, I think designing in what you need, recognizing what you need, then designing it in is always the way forward. That feels really hopeful to me because it feels we can do anything.
I think both having those closest to you supporting you and having that strong support group to draw on really important because almost like inbuilt cheerleaders for life. But also then, like you said, designing it in. So creating a bit of a blueprint so you can get to where you want to be. And that's pretty important. What's next for you and your mission? What's coming up for a brilliant thing?
We're running our second event very soon, which I think this podcast will come out after that event. So we're following the format that we did last year, which was really about platforming people who are doing brilliant things and giving people space to talk about their work and be inspired and get connected. So this is something that we want to do every year because honestly, the people that we come across, we are always so inspired by. So we need to create spaces for people to share. So our events are going to become bigger, hopefully. We want to work nationally. So we've started in Greater Manchester and we're now starting to move south a little bit as well. With my two sisters being down south, we want to do some work down there as well. And healing centered work world is our sort of new horizon. So we want to change the work world. I think we've narrowed it down from we want to change the world to we want to change the work world, which feels a little bit more doable. And we want to create the conditions for healthy people, for healthy organizations to thrive. So we need to change the working practices that have become so normal, because if we allow the pain and the difficulties in the world to shape how we work, then we're only going to get the result of pain and difficulty. So if we can just take that little bit of a step back and work out how to do things better, we can all be those ripple starters. We can all be those people those bosses that people remember, those teams that people really want to work in, those people that can inspire other people and be on those platforms. Everybody can have that. So we're calling it a healing centered work world because healing centered is about designing everything with this kind of aim in mind. So it's not another, oh, we'll do it later or when we've got more money or more time. It's essential. We just want more organizations to be part of a healing centered work world.
Thanks for sharing your future plans from annual events to expanding a future work world and to expanding geographically across the UK. When we think about listeners, many of them want to help and they're all across the world. They don't always know how. Where can individuals make the biggest difference in a simple, everyday way?
I think design is very underrated. Design sounds like a bit of something that you might have to go somewhere to study. Look and watch and notice, you'll see that everything shapes something. So even just the way that you live your daily life, that impacts other people. So, for example, if you choose to shop local, if you choose to maybe take your exercise by walking in your local area rather than driving to a gym, if you look out for other people and keep an eye on how you could give other people an opportunity, all of these things that keep us well and happy, but they're also things that we can share. So whatever it is that you value most, how can that be reflected outwards as well? And in that way, we can all be the designers of change. We can all be the designers of a better future. But it does take that noticing and then intentional action. And if we don't do that, then something else will shape our lives. So if we don't shape our lives, something will shape our lives. And if we lived in a wonderful world where there was peace and harmony and enough for everybody and lots to go around, then that might be fine. But we don't live in that world. And so I think we have a responsibility to do the noticing, to make those intentional choices towards the change that we want to see and all become those designers.
I like that because you can adapt it to your lifestyle or your choices or the intentionality of your passion.
Yeah.
Lean in where it's possible and do it intentionally. That's a great tip. What's something about your work or the voluntary sector that you wish more people understood?
That we need to get paid is the main one. And that goes deep. So people that work in charities often don't feel that they should be paid for the work that they do. People that volunteer often think that everything should be done for free. It's not just the capitalists, the world have these views. This is deep conditioning. I think it's also for women and people who've been marginalized. I think this kind of over-giving, over-responsibility. And there's been studies into the connection between over-responsible personality traits or over-responsible behaviors being connected to chronic illness and long-term health conditions. And so I think we've got to start asking or demanding a little bit more rather than asking. And that just today, we're organising this event and we haven't got any funding for this event. We're paying for it ourselves. We have got some funding applications in, but we haven't heard anything back yet. But it's really important to us that we have this annual event where we platform other people. And somebody messaged me today and said, "Oh, can I do something for your event?" And she offered a service, really. And I messaged back, and I know this person, so I was like, "We'd love to work with you again, but we haven't got any funding at the moment. So can we keep you in the loop?" And she said, "Oh no, I was offering for free." She said, "I love fresh air," because I'd said running it on fresh air at the moment. And I haven't replied to the message yet because I'm in a bit of a conundrum because I really want to work with her. She's so generous and kind for offering this thing for free. But actually, it's not sitting right with my values because she should be paid for that work. And I know that there's other people that have taken advantage of that goodwill. So I think we will work with her. We would like to work with her, but we're going to have to find a way of paying her for it. I think that's the boundary I need to hold with that particular example. So one of our principles is contribute and benefit. Sometimes we can afford to give more than we receive. If we've got more money, more time, more energy, more ideas, of course, sharing that and being generous with that is important. But we also need to benefit. And if we don't recognize that we all have a need to benefit from the work that we do, from the way that we live our lives, then it's very easy to tip that balance and go into that horrible place where we haven't got enough and we have to stop completely, or we take it from our own bodies. So we take that, we get depleted, we absorb that pressure. I think paying us more money and recognizing that everybody needs to benefit from everything that everybody does.
I think that's a really good one to pick up because I guess when you think about a volunteer, the mindset for many of us who volunteer, and I'm probably one of those chronic volunteers now focused around some particular areas, is you don't think about any kind of remuneration for it because your reward is the volunteering. But it's different if you're working in the sector and if you don't have a day job, which then allows you to give you off your time. So I think there's something there about just people just being a little thoughtful about what is each person's context because everyone's context is not the same.
Absolutely. It's not always about money, it's about resources and what you're getting out of something. And obviously, we don't want to tip that into only volunteer if you get something. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a balance between giving and receiving. And if we are doing a lot of giving, then somewhere in our lives, there has to be a lot of receiving. And that might be money or time or something else. But it's a really good one to reflect on, I think, every so often.
I think so. And there's good karma points somewhere in the future coming your way as well. Now I'm going to move us to the signature questions for Meet the Mancunian. If Manchester has a superpower, what would it be and how have you seen it in action?
The mix of people, the mix of places. I love the fact that Manchester is so connected to the green spaces around the outside, but then also the kind of urban environment and the complete and utter mix of people and influences and stuff within Manchester. I also like that you can walk around it, you can walk from end to end and experience all of those things. It still feels like a small city, even though it's growing all the time. So I think its superpower is in its diversity and just big mix of stuff.
I like that about the mix. If you could gift Manchester one new value, habit, or mindset, what would you choose to strengthen community life?
I would choose a pause. So I would love it if we collectively, as a city or a country or the world, collectively decided to pause for a day or a week and just take a step back and just reflect. There's so much power in reflection. Somebody recently told me that their organization had decided to have a pause. And the usual story, it had come from a place of burnout and everybody being overstretched, and to get some internal systems and structures work or productive work. And it had this huge impact on their organizational future. And I think if we could collectively agree that we're going to pause here, so if we could just have a pause for nothingness, and maybe that's what I'm craving right now, but it would be lovely to have an annual pause.
I like that about an annual pause for reflection, because you're right, there is huge power in reflection and taking some still time. We don't get it often,
Yeah.
but it would be nice. I can totally resonate with that. If you could have a 10-minute conversation with a community hero from Manchester's past or present, who would it be with and what would you ask them?
Oh, I think my teenagers would tell me off if I didn't say somebody like the Stone Roses or Oasis or somebody. But I wonder what it's like to really shape the cultural references of an era, even not coming from Manchester. Manchester has such a huge cultural significance in the 90s. And actually being part of that and actually shaping that, it feels like both an honor and a responsibility. And I'd love to talk about how people have navigated that responsibility for a nation and an era. And some free tickets would be nice too.
That's a really good idea. Like you said, there's being in their shoes and trying to understand their perspective of what it was like.
Yeah.
And I even wonder if they did really realize that they were doing such era defining work. Potentially not at the moment.
I think probably
reflection.
not in the moment. Yeah. I wonder if they realize now. If not, I want to tell them.
Looking back, what's a life lesson or a piece of wisdom that this journey has taught you? Something you carry with you always?
It's just like a genuine trust in people. That has gotten me into some sticky situations sometimes. I'm not sure it's always the best thing to be, but I am a trusting person, and I do really believe that change is possible. I really believe in possibility. I don't know whether that's wisdom or not, but it is a belief. It is something I really believe in.
And if it's important to you, that's the important part. Like you, I believe people are basically good. And I think given the right encouragement, everybody can do the right thing. But sometimes you need to work on the gentle persuasion a bit. What's the best way for listeners to connect with you, to support your mission or learn more?
So our website is the hub of all things. So it's brilliantthing.co.uk. And from there, you can get onto our socials and our mailing list. We run inspiration season a couple of times a year. So you can join the inspiration list and join this inner circle of organizations working towards change and changing our working practices so that we can have healthier, more sustainable and inspiring organizations.
Thank you so much, Kerry. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's been lovely.
Thank you for listening to the Meet the Mancunian Social Impact Stories from Manchester. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who believes in the power of passion and purpose, or leave a review to help others discover the podcast. You can connect with me at social media @Meet the Mancunian on Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky, and @Meet the Mancunian podcast on YouTube. I'm Deepa Thomas-Sutcliffe, and I'll be back next Tuesday with another story from the people shaping Manchester. Next week, we hear from Marianne Ekasu, who talks about supporting sick children. Until then, thank you for listening and for being part of this community.